Hello and welcome to episode 35 of Life in General. My name is Nick.
I am Ian.
Why do you say it all weird like that?
I don't
again?
know. I'm trying to
Is
mix
that your
shit
thing?
up.
It's like it's Robot Ian. So I'm joined by Robot Ian today.
Yeah. You need to... I think I need some repair because I'm a terrible robot.
Yeah, I know.
Not to be confused with an invisible robot.
Invisible robots?
Yes.
As always, any questions or comments, you can email us at lifeingeneralmi@gmail.com. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Twitter at LIGpod.
Take two and you still fuck it up.
Yeah.
That's all right. Hey.
Check out our website, lifeingeneralpodcast.com. We've got all of our previous episodes on there. We are available on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, Podcast Addict. Just about anywhere else that you can find podcasts, you should find us.
Indeed.
So for anyone out there, this is actually take two of this episode because
Yeah.
I kind of screwed up and messed up the first one.
Luckily, we caught the mess up before the show had completed.
Well, yeah, it wasn't very far into it.
No.
So this is take two. So we should be a little bit more polished at this one now, Ian.
Yeah. I'm more prepared this time.
Yeah. Yeah, because once again, Ian has no notes or anything.
I have all the notes in the world. It's called the internet.
Yeah.
Right at my fingertips.
So, back in February.
Yes.
Well, shit. So,
I know it's weird having to go over all this. Again.
yeah,
It's
because
like,
I already covered all this shit, and I got to talk about it again. So, back in February, there was I think it was New York Times released a list ranking the presidents from best to worst from 1 to 45.
right.
So, and it kind of gave me this idea about doing a top 10 list about presidents. And then, Ian, you had suggested the same thing, too. So, it was something I'd already kind of been thinking about.
Right.
But
Yeah, it just kind of worked out.
and I don't know, I've always been a big fan of lists. And should I talk about the episode that I told you?
Yes, yeah, we might as well just completely repeat everything we did the last.
So,
take.
So we did an episode on conspiracy theories a couple episodes back. I don't remember exactly when it was.
Yep.
And then it just happened to be the last week I was listening to one of my favorite shows is called You're on the List. It's kind of where we got the idea for doing the top 10 list and all that stuff from. And they had the guys on there from Tinfoil Hat, I think is the name of the podcast. I guess I should have looked that up in between takes, you know.
Well, I mean, whenever I enter a room, my unpreparedness and basic incompetence tends to spread. It's like a contagion.
Is that what that
So
is?
yeah, so you're bound to suffer a little bit from that.
So yeah, and it's really interesting because the guys from Tinfoil Hat are. One guy is kind of, I'm pretty sure he's a 9/11 truther, and the other guy is doesn't believe we landed on the moon, and so but they really know their shit when it comes to conspiracy theories. Like they go deep in this.
They know it, yeah.
And it's really interesting to listen to the back and forth because the guys from You're on the List get kind of heated with them about some of the stuff. They like lightly touch on the whole Earth is hollow thing. And all that, so it's just really...
So essentially everything. I mean, they obviously didn't steal from us, but we can kind of like in our own minds think that maybe they stole from us because we steal from them all the time.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, it's reciprocal.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
it just
bloat our self-importance a little bit.
Yeah. So if you're out there, I mean, if you want to listen to something really interesting, I think it's definitely an episode to listen to.
Yeah, it's going to be my first time listening to them, but it's definitely something. It's going to be my. Foot in the door for the podcast because as much as we've talked about them, I've just never gotten around to listening
So the name of the show is You're on the List. That's with Brett Ernst and Pete Giovine, or the comedians.
Okay,
so it's funny. It's but yeah, check that out. But so we wanted to kind of do our own list when it came to presidents. So we decided to do a top 10 list of U.S. presidents.
Yep, our own personal opinions.
Of course. And first off, I want to say neither one of us are presidential scholars by any means.
No.
So,
well, I mean, I know how awesome of a president I would make, but it's probably more.
Yeah, probably not.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I doubt that. I don't know if I could vote for you.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't vote for you.
Really? You wouldn't vote for me?
No, you're too centrist for me. And I'm too lefty for you. Probably.
It's funny because I'm very liberal.
You are, but there's a lot of things you're very centrist on.
Like?
That I don't think you should be centrist on.
Like what?
I don't know. I mean, we've talked about it in our conversations. I don't know. I didn't come prepared. I don't think about this shit.
God.
I don't think about what I'm saying. I just talk. But I know there's been times where you've said things and I'm like, wow. And 20 years ago, that probably would have been right of center.
Probably.
So
yeah, I'm sure a lot of stuff is. Because I don't know. I try to be a little more pragmatic about stuff, but I don't know.
Well, me too. But I mean, pragmatism is everything that I am. But when it comes to my political views, I'm very. We'll say at least 3 steps to the left of center.
I wouldn't say that
for the most part.
I wouldn't say I'm centrist on a lot of stuff. I would just say that I'm a little bit more, even though I might have strong, like liberal beliefs on some things. There are some things where I could agree on some of the right's point of views, maybe.
Okay. I wouldn't say I would agree, but I guess I'm not so far to the left that I'm not willing to find common ground. But definitely more left than you, I think, overall.
Well, because like with like abortion, I could agree to putting bans on abortion after, say, 24 weeks. After the point of viability, basically.
Point of viability, yes. Is 24 weeks viable?
Roughly, yes.
See, that's. See, I have a problem because isn't it 20 weeks is what a lot of the states are going for right now, and 20 weeks. There's some women who don't even know they're pregnant in 20 weeks.
Fuck, man! If you don't know you're pregnant by 5 months, I mean that's just.
I guess so. I don't know. I don't. I mean, I've never been pregnant.
That's
so
5
I'm not
months.
Sure. Yeah,
that's 5 months.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, I don't know.
No, I agree with you on the viability thing because, if once I mean, we're not having an abortion conversation. I agree with you. I don't want to get too deep into it.
No. But there are a lot of people on the left that say no, there should be absolutely no restrictions. Just like the right says the same thing about gun laws.
Right.
Each side has their own
extreme.
Yeah. And unfortunately, extreme points of view. God, I'm so far off fucking topic.
That's okay. But we'll get back to it.
The most of America isn't on the far right or far left when it comes to topics like that.
But it's the far right and far left that are the most vocal.
They drive the narrative. Yeah. But most of the country on topics like that are a little bit more centrist. And that's why I say, I could maybe that's why I come off more centrist sometimes.
Perhaps.
because I can see that common ground. I can meet you in the middle somewhere. If you're willing to come my way, I'm willing to come your way a little bit, depending on the topic.
For
obviously.
me, it's you can be extreme left or extreme right. And when I say extreme, my level of extreme, like I said, maybe 2 or 3 steps to the left or 2 or 3 steps to the right of center. But you also, as long as you're willing to alter your view or change your mind when presented with rational, demonstrable evidence,
yes,
to the point. Yeah. If you come at me with why we need more guns, because I believe we don't need more guns. I'm not saying we don't need any guns, but I'm saying we don't need more guns. But if you come to me with real, accurate, scientifically proven statistics that say that having more guns will make a difference, which they haven't. I'm just using this as an example, but I'm rational enough, and I guess I can be centrist enough to see the value in that kind of rational thinking.
And I think that's what we need more of. We need more of people in government that can say, look, I'm going to stand by my principles. Mm-hmm. But standing by my principles, I'm not going to let that get in the way of making sensible policy for the country.
Right. Based on evidence, based on
exactly,
facts.
Because that's how our government ran for a very long time.
Yeah. Not anymore.
Well, I mean, it's not something that's happened overnight.
No.
This is something that has evolved for the last 40 years, 40, 50 years.
I would even say farther
probably even
back,
longer than that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit farther than that.
But, well, I mean, I'm 38, so I mean, I don't know really, how it was, prior to that. But
well, I'm 40, so I know a lot more.
You're so fucking old.
My wisdom is.
You have an abundance of wisdom.
I
now.
do.
Yes,
I'm a wizened old man now.
Jackass.
I have a couple gray hairs to prove it. So anyway,
so back to our top 10 list.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does kind of circle to.
I guess so, because I mean, we are doing top 10 presidents. I don't know. You want to throw something out there?
Sure. Like I think I said in the first take. Let's start with number one. I mean, not number one on our list, but the number one president, the first president,
George Washington,
Mr. Washington. As I pointed out, mushroom head.
Mushroom head.
His head looks like a fucking mushroom.
And I said it looked like a penis, but it's
which
okay.
It's all the same thing. More so on the dollar bill than in the picture I'm looking at, but it is what it is.
What were some interesting things that Mr. Washington was known for?
Well, I learned today that he established the 6-member Supreme Court. Yes.
Okay, so in the first take, Ian didn't know any of this stuff other than the fact that he was the first president and he was the commander-in-chief in defeating the British.
Yes.
So then,
now I learned that he established a 6-member Supreme Court.
Yes, he did that in 1789. He established the U.S. Navy in 1794.
He was president for a long time. I didn't realize.
Throughout his presidency, he really rebuilt the relationship that the U.S. had with Britain, eventually giving them most favored nation status in return for the British vacating their forts out west, which eventually led to...
When you say out west, though, at this time...
Western...
Was
No, it was like Western... Yeah, you're right. It was
like Pennsylvania.
No, it wasn't that. It was more like Missouri or...
Right, okay. But it wasn't the West as we understand it today.
It was like the Midwest.
Yeah.
At least I think it was. I'm not really sure. I guess I didn't really...
We'd have to look at a map.
I don't know how far west...
We'd moved at that point.
Yeah, because I know a lot of it was owned... Well, Texas and all that was
owned by Mexico.
Mexico.
Well, and we purchased Louisiana from the French, right?
Correct. So, which we'll get into that later.
Yes,
also.
we will. Yes, we will.
So yeah, I mean, George Washington's got to be on the list. Every list I looked at, he was on.
Well, see, and that's the thing. I don't know if I'd put him in the top 10 because, as I started to point out when we realized we were recording improperly, he himself even considered the presidency to be more of a figurehead position.
Yeah, but it
didn't hold the same status that it does now. And again, I could be wrong, but I was under the impression that there were even presidents before him, but we hadn't established ourselves as a nation.
But
well, they held that particular top
position,
level
yes.
kind of
but
thing.
I think there was like 6 before him, or 5 something.
But I mean, again, that was before the establishment of the country.
But George Washington really helped lay the foundation for a lot of
for what a president is.
Yeah, and a lot of the establishment, a lot of what the establishment positions are throughout the government.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if I'd put him on a top 10 just because he was the first.
I would definitely. Well, it's not so much on because he was the first president.
Right.
It was just he did so much, especially for the founding of America.
Okay, yeah. I mean, he was a revolutionary general, and
yes,
and he was, and he did it at the cost of his. Well, he betrayed his own military because he was a general in the British Army.
Yep,
and he
defected. And I believe he had 3 or 4 horses shot out from beneath him also.
Oh, and there's the crossing of the Delaware, the famous thing. I don't know.
Yeah,
I have an American history education, so. Of American history, which says a lot, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know. I would definitely have to put him on a.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
We'll have to compromise. I think maybe at number 10,
but Abraham Lincoln, I think, has got to be on there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if not 1, he's 2.
Yeah.
And then that's where we might have some little bit of debate, not arguing, but debate on who should be number 1 and. Lincoln's going to be in contention for
personally. I would put Lincoln number 1, just because he did so much. He did so much. Not only did he is he known for the Emancipation Proclamation, Gettysburg Address. He also signed the Homestead Act in 1862 that allowed poor people to obtain land at basically little or no cost, just as long as they had not taken up arms against the United States
during the Civil War.
Yeah. Well, I guess not. I guess not necessarily during the Civil War, but I think at any time.
Oh. Was that a common thing for people to just go, "I'm taking up arms against the United States"?
No, but I guess if you were, it's just 16th president, so I'm sure you're right, because probably no one was really alive from the
they didn't have the
Revolutionary
yellow
War.
flags with the black snakes saying "Don't tread on me" yet. And,
yeah,
I think that kind of came later.
So yeah, you're probably right. It probably was
the Civil War situation.
Yeah.
And then of course he fought and won the Civil War with it. As the leader. Of
yeah. But what I was getting at was Civil War aside. He, like I said, Homestead Act. He signed the Land Grant Act in 1862. Jesus. You knew what the hell I meant.
Yeah, I did know, but
1862. I'm not used to talking about the 1800s, the olden days.
Yeah,
but
the 1900s are the olden days now.
I know. The Land Grant Act basically gave land to new universities, just as long as they were low cost or no cost to the students. Michigan State is a land grant university. Penn State's also a land grant university. There's a bunch of land grant universities that came from that. In July of 1862, he also signed the bill that created the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, which basically later became the IRS.
It's funny because I was actually just about to ask you, how at a time when it wasn't legally mandatory to pay taxes, and I wouldn't guarantee, but I would assume that not a lot of people paid taxes.
No.
Where did all that money come from?
Where
did the money for the government come from? Because legally, I guess maybe it was legally, you were legally obligated, but there was no legal recourse to take people to.
I was trying to remember which president it was. It was James Madison. After War of 1812, established a tax policy that was tariff. It was tariff based. That really ushered in an unprecedented prosperity in the U.S. That was mainly because of the tariffs, and that was that way and through the early 1900s. So,
the tax codes and stuff that as we see them now really didn't go into effect until World War II.
Yes,
because they needed money to pay for the war.
Yeah. So so you were asking about taxes. That's where where
I didn't know that. So
that's where the money was coming from. Was that? So basically, that later became the IRS. In 1863, he signed the National Banking Act that created our national banking system. Also, so Mr. Lincoln was a little bit more than just
the Civil War guy.
But
historically speaking, he's always going to be defined by the Civil War.
Yeah, of course he will be.
And
it was a defining moment in our country.
Yeah, and defined by why we fought that in the first place. Although there are a lot of people today who are trying to rewrite the history of why we fought that war.
I used to live by a bunch of them.
Yeah. Yes. For the record, it was fought because white people wanted to continue to own black people. That is why we fought against it, and that is why we won. Because,
yes.
For the most part, I think the good guys should usually beat the bad guys. Anyway.
So if Lincoln is going to be your one or two, who would the other one be?
It's between him and Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. And that's because of his defining accomplishments.
His legacy.
His legacy was not only being a wartime president, and though he didn't survive to the very end of the war, he was a wartime president through and through. But also his policies, essentially the New Deal, which really got us out of the Great Depression.
Yeah. And as far as wartime president, I would say a lot of people would say that that's also a knock on him. That took him so long to get into World War II.
But if you look at the history, he wanted to. He wanted to get us in there a lot sooner than what we did.
He sure didn't act like it.
No, because he wasn't being allowed to. his political rivals were pushing for isolationism, and he had to go along with that because, again, it's one of those situations where if you're trying to push domestic policy that is not very popular amongst your peers but is doing the right thing, you don't want to potentially damage those policies by having to compromise on other things. And I think that's a lot of why we didn't get into the war sooner.
Yeah, but a lot of people knock him for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, historically speaking, you always wonder, if this had happened differently, would this have, World War II is a big one. That's the one that a lot of people go to. There's been a lot of alternative history books written on it, fictional alternative history.
Man
books.
in the High Castle, which is
a TV show.
Show, which is a fantastic show.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to catch up on it yet, but it's on my list.
They've been greenlit for season 3. I think they're working on it right now.
Cool. I like to have a little bit of catalog of stuff before I ignore it for years, like I have with Game of Thrones and stuff like that. So there's a lot of what ifs there. As I see it, there's a lot of good came out of it. A lot of good came out of the struggle that, is with all human endeavors.
Forged in steel.
Adversity breeds innovation, and where we're at today is as a result, essentially, of what we had to go through through World War II. That being said, if we had gone in sooner, the outcome could have changed, and we would be possibly in a different place because we would have gone in less prepared.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, you don't know. You don't know how it would turn out.
We don't know, but it's one of those things that you can't. I don't want to look back on history and say Roosevelt should have gone in sooner, even though he probably should have, and I know he wanted to. A lot of the history books or history stories I've read on him and documentaries I've seen have indicated that he was prepared to get into the war in 39.
Yeah.
And by 40 for sure. Yeah, not into the war, but he was adamant that Hitler was a threat by 39, and he was definitely
wasn't he Hitler Time Man of the Year in 39?
I think it was 38.
Was it 38?
I think it was 38, but
okay.
I could be wrong.
It was one of those. It was
because by 39 he was already starting to move across Europe.
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe it was 38.
And 38 was the Olympics.
Okay.
So
yeah, I guess that makes sense then.
So, historians have said that it was obvious that he saw Hitler as the same type of threat that Britain did, and it kind of fell on deaf ears. There are a lot of Americans, specifically in politics and in power, who were Nazis.
Yeah.
They embraced the Nazi philosophy, and they didn't see Hitler as a threat because they wanted to kind of impose those kind of philosophies here in our country.
Yeah.
So it was difficult for Roosevelt to be able to push a forceful militaristic agenda against a political ideal until it actually was knocking on our door.
Yeah, so, I can definitely see that.
So now, going back and looking at it and saying, well, he should have gone in sooner. Yeah, maybe he should have, and I think he wanted to, but those decisions were made, and when the time came, he ushered us through a very difficult time, and not just through the war, but also through
and I think that's a little bit more. I think he's got more of a legacy than people really know about. I mean, obviously people know about the New Deal,
right?
Creating Social Security and the banking reforms and everything that he pushed through at the time.
Social safety net.
But I don't think a lot of people know that shortly after he took office, he closed all the banks. Every bank in the U.S. He closed them. They established the FDIC, and they wouldn't reopen the banks until Congress passed reform. So the banks were closed for 3 or 4 days, whatever it was. So they reopened all the banks, and because of the Emergency Banking Act that they passed, it gave the public confidence once again in their local banks.
Right.
So all these people that have been stashing money in their houses deposited in the bank, and shortly
it created an economic system again.
Yes. Well, the following, I think it was the following Monday after that, it was the largest upswing in the stock exchange history.
Well, probably until recently.
No, I think even still now.
Really?
I think it's still the single largest gain in one day.
Because we've had some pretty massive gains in the last, say, 10, 15 years.
And if it has been passed, it's still pretty high up there.
True.
So, yeah, I mean, he did a lot of that. He established a minimum wage, Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938.
Essentially, everything that Republicans today are still trying to destroy.
Oh, no. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
He also helped create the United Nations.
Is my mic still on?
No, you turned your mic off.
Oh, I did.
No, there's a button on the side, Ian.
There's a button?
On the side. See where it says on off?
Oh,
yeah. Is it on?
Am I back?
Yeah, look at that. Ian,
yay!
Ian rejoined the show.
I have opposable thumbs. Sorry, I was messing with my mic and I turned it off. No.
Now you people know what I deal with all the time.
Yeah, well.
So I think there's a lot of stuff, and I think you can say that for probably almost any president we talk about. There's always so much stuff on the backside that doesn't get talked about in your history classes because it's not the war, it's not the Depression, it's not, big speeches. It's little stuff behind the scenes that's given or created these huge positive impacts for generations afterwards.
Well, that might come into play with my number 3,
which would be
Jefferson. Because he's not, historically speaking, he's not talked about a lot.
No.
But the Louisiana Purchase, which we mentioned.
Yep.
Did we mention it in this side or the defunct episode? I don't remember.
I don't remember. I know
we said we were going to get back to it. I wasn't sure it was this one.
It might have been this one.
But anyway, Louisiana Purchase. But my thing with Jefferson, honestly, is more of what he did before he was president, and that is
banging the slaves.
Well, yeah, by that standard, and it should always be talked about. You don't want to, quote unquote, whitewash history. But a lot of the things that Jefferson did essentially came down to articulating what a democracy should be.
Yeah,
and not articulating it as not just articulating it, but creating a literary guide for it. Because he wrote the Declaration of Independence. He helped write the Bill of Rights. He mostly wrote the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
He is the literary father of our democracy. And I don't think he's given a lot of the credit that he deserves for that. Taking that into account, his at the time he was a slave owner, but he was also known for freeing a lot of his slaves, even and not being a cruel. And again, I don't want to whitewash history, but as far as slave owners go, he was at the better end of it. But theoretically, but a lot of the ideals and principles that he input into those literary works that defined our democracy were the same ones that Lincoln was able to use and establish that slavery was wrong. So, because even though he was himself a slave owner, he kind of created the fundamentals with which a future generation could take that out of the equation.
Absolutely.
So, like I said, I don't want to take away from the fact that, yes, he was a slave owner, and yes, he was intimate with his slaves. But
look at it this way, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, and it's another thing that doesn't get talked about, was in March of I think it was 1807, he helped pass legislation through Congress that ended the slave trade in the United States.
Yeah, yep.
Which didn't go into effect till January 1808, but that was the earliest point that the Constitution would let them end the slave trade. So,
at least to the Intercontinental.
Exactly, bringing them in.
Yes. So,
because he couldn't, obviously at that time he
couldn't have abolished slavery.
No, and I don't think he really wanted to at that point. But
See, that's hard to say because you look at some of the things he's written, and that's
why I said it seems like he saw it as kind of a necessary evil.
Exactly, but he did see it as an evil.
Yeah,
and you don't. Again, I don't want to whitewash it, but you don't want to take away from the fact that he had the foresight to know. And I personally believe that a lot of the things he put into the way he worded things, I think he was anticipating that.
I'm sure he probably saw it coming at some point.
Right. And it wasn't that much long. I mean, we're talking 50 years.
Yeah.
Between the time that he was president and the time that slavery went away.
But Thomas Jefferson also drafted the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. That disestablished the Church of England in Virginia.
Yes. But it was also because at the same time when he was president, and I think I've told you the story, he received a letter from the Baptists of Danbury.
Yeah.
And they were writing to him because they were being persecuted for their religious beliefs in their own town. And that was when the Establishment Clause, part of it was he was working on drafting it. He wrote back to them and said there will always be a wall of separation between religion and the government.
Yep.
Now, do you know who were persecuting the Baptists of Danbury?
Who's that?
The Congregationalists of Danbury.
Of
which
course.
They're both Christians.
Of course.
They were being persecuted by their own fucking faith.
No, but you get that in there's what is it? Lutherans that have Missouri and
Missouri Synod and Wisconsin Synod. Yeah.
So I mean,
it's still, I know it still goes on, and we're not going to get into it. But I have a solution for that.
So he drafted the Religious Freedom Act of the time.
Right. His was to establish that it had no place in the public square.
Correct. Yeah.
As far as government sanction.
Correct. He wanted everyone to practice however they saw fit.
Amongst themselves.
He also created the University of Virginia, which is actually what's on the one thing that's on his tombstone. If you read his tombstone, it says nothing about being president.
I know. Well, there was I don't know if it's still going on, but there was a strong movement in the early 2000s to diminish his contribution to history, primarily because of his views on the Establishment Clause.
Yeah.
And the First Amendment, which guarantees the freedom of religion, but the removal of religion from the political theater, essentially.
Yeah, so his tombstone actually says, "Here was buried Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence author of the." It's kind of hard to read. It's kind of blurry.
It is, yeah.
Author of the Declaration of American Independence, of the Statute of Virginia, so it's saying that this and that. Okay. Yeah. Of the Statute of Virginia and for religious freedom, and father of the University of Virginia. So it doesn't say anything about being president.
And he was the third, I believe.
Yes, he was the third president.
My screensaver went on from March 4th to 1801 till March 4th of 1809. Yeah. Which ironically, we kind of skipped over John Adams, but I think history kind of skips over John Adams a little bit too.
Yeah.
He was president from March 4th, 1797 to March 4th of 1801, and Jefferson was president from March 4th, 1801 to March 4th of 1809. March 4th seems to be a consistent thing going through all the way till the 9th president.
Yeah.
And
that's when they changed
because he died in office.
Oh.
Literally 1 month to the day after taking office. Yeah. I forgot about that, yeah.
That was William Henry Harrison.
And then the March 4th thing kicks back in until the 12th president. But he died in office, too.
It was later on, though, until they changed it to January, right?
Yeah, I guess.
It's January 20th.
I'm already up to...
and it was pretty late. It was like the late 1800s, early 1900s when they changed it, I want to say.
Well,
off the top of my head.
Again, Lincoln changed it because he died in office.
Yeah.
Through no fault of his own.
Yep.
I did not know this. It changes in Garfield with Garfield. James Garfield.
Who was the
James A. Garfield 20th
president?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he died in office, and then we'll go back to the 4th.
Like I said, it was just not too
March
long ago.
4th was the day.
Yes, that was the day of inauguration.
Mm-hmm. It changed. It changed after Roosevelt.
Okay, so yeah, I was right.
Yeah.
Early 1900s.
Yeah, 1940. Well, obviously Roosevelt died in office in April of 45.
Oh, so it was mid 1900s.
Truman was president from April 45 till January 20th of 1953.
Okay. And speaking of John Adams, on that poll that came out from the New York Times back in February, John Adams was ranked 14th.
Huh.
Yeah.
Do we know much about him? Because I honestly don't.
I don't either.
He was Washington's vice president.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he was one of the signatories on the.
Yeah,
on the
I didn't have him on my list. So I didn't do a whole lot of research into him.
So you just kind of did your list and then that was it.
No. I did 15. I did 15 presidents that I thought I could entertain on the list somewhere. Some of them are like very fringe.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, the fringe ones I'm not even going to talk about. But I came prepared with all 45 listed, so.
Go to hell. Go to hell. Well, and when I say fringe, I mean like Jimmy Carter. I wouldn't put Jimmy Carter on a top 10 list.
Right, neither would I. But he's one of those ones who probably could have been if he had gotten a chance to.
But the reason I kind of looked into him was just because he's done so much for outside of office, with Habitat for Humanity, with the Carter Center, which is does a lot for impoverished and oppressed people throughout the world. The Carter Center goes around and makes sure that countries are doing free and legal elections. That's the word I was trying to think of.
Yeah, his diplomacy, his diplomatic endeavors have been very positive too.
Even when he was in office in 78.
Well, some would argue that he lost his office because of his diplomatic failings with the Iran hostage situation. I know. There's a lot of detail that I'm just talking about.
The detail is that
the Republicans sabotaged it.
Yeah, and the incoming Israeli president at the time, Iranian president at the time, they actually came out and did an interview. I want to say it was 2010. Where he said that during the U.S. or the lead up to the U.S. election, he was actually approached by the people from the Reagan campaign that said, "Hey, go ahead and hold those hostages until after the election, and then we'll do an arms deal with you."
Yeah,
and that's why,
that almost cost several people their freedom in terms of going to jail.
Well, that and the fact that and that's why the hostages were released. Like literally 2 hours, it was 2 hours after the inauguration.
Right.
But anyway, go back to what I was going to say though. In 78, he sat down with the Israeli prime minister and the Egyptian president for the Camp David Accords. Mm-hmm. So he helped come to an agreement between the two to give up territory that was taken in the 73 war. So he did. There was a lot of stuff. I think that Jimmy Carter obviously gets knocked on for a lot of stuff, right. But I think there's some stuff behind the scenes that he probably should get credit for that he really doesn't.
Right, and I should point out that he's one of the good Christians. I call him. He's one of the ones who lives by his beliefs.
He does
wholeheartedly.
He does,
and doesn't judge people because he's been very open about equal rights for LGBTQ.
Yep,
and I haven't heard him say much about abortion.
I'm not sure either. I haven't heard anything.
But specifically, he's been very open about that, which a lot of his contemporary Christian cohorts are not.
Not the one sitting across the table from you.
Are you one of Jimmy Carter's cohorts?
No, but
okay. Or I should say peers.
The another person that I would say on the fringe would be someone like Woodrow Wilson, who. I guess probably the only big thing he really ever did was creating the League of Nations.
After the First World War.
Yeah, after the First War.
Yeah. And it's difficult to say because it's kind of, it's downplayed in the sense that World War I doesn't have the historical significance in our history books as World War II. Although if it weren't the way World War I was handled, the way the armistice was handled is the direct reason why we had to fight in World War II.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't even have thought of him technically as a war president because our role in World War I was a little. It was almost distant.
Yeah.
I mean, we had soldiers there. We were fighting in the war, but we were doing it through our allies' armies. I mean, we were more of a support team than we were, in there just to fight.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Wilson is.
Well, that's why
Wilson's Wilson's conduct during the treaty it was the Treaty of Versailles, correct? That ended the First World War.
God, I'm drawing a blank.
Whatever the treaty was, he allowed the British government and the French government, and from what I've read, against his better judgment, he allowed them to dictate the terms of Germany's surrender, which utterly destroyed Germany for nearly a decade, and it allowed Hitler to rise to power.
It was more than a decade.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were like third world country for a decade because of that. And he did nothing to stop it. And again, against his better judgment, there's letters written that he said it was bad. It was a bad deal, but he didn't do anything to force the issue.
And that's kind of why I said he's on the fringe. I wouldn't necessarily put him in a list. James Monroe was another one.
See, I know nothing about Monroe.
Well, he's the fifth president. Really, kind of the really only big thing he did was the Monroe Doctrine, which considered European efforts to colonize areas in the Americas as an act of aggression. He also drafted the Missouri Compromise, which barred slavery north and west of the newly formed state. So it's kind of,
I didn't know that.
So he did some things. He wasn't a highly successful president. I mean, let's see, he was the fifth president.
Yeah.
So
he was president for 8 years.
That February poll had him in as 18th overall. So they had him on kind of a fringe. Outside also.
He's on the better half of the total.
Yeah. Well, but someone else that I wouldn't necessarily put in a top 10, but probably a lot of people out there would be JFK.
Yeah, it's tough because I would put him on the top 10. He'd have to be low on the list, but not because of any particular failings of his, but more just the fact that he didn't have the opportunity to do the things he wanted.
He started a lot of things.
Yep.
He
like not going into Vietnam and taking our troops back out of there.
But
not to get conspiracy theory about it, but I mean, what was it? 2 weeks after his assassination, Johnson doubled the amount of troops that were going in, and we were bringing them home before he died. So it makes you wonder.
But he did sign the Equal Pay Act in '63. He helped really put the Voting Rights, not the Voting Rights Act, but the
Civil Rights,
the Civil Rights Act of '64 together.
Which, to Johnson's credit, because Johnson would not be on my list, although he did do some good things. To Johnson's credit, he could have squashed that, and he didn't. He pushed that forward.
No, because Kennedy couldn't get it pushed through. If it wasn't for Johnson, it wouldn't have gotten passed.
I don't know. I think Kennedy
absolutely
could have gotten it through.
No,
because he would have had more public support because they wouldn't have had all the protesting going on about the war.
But it was Johnson's backdoor deals with senators and congressmen in the South that got that deal pushed through.
True, and he did have the benefit of being a Southerner himself.
And that's why
helped, but
that's why I would put Johnson on a list pretty low, 9 or 10. But it's just on the strength of, like I said, the Civil Rights Act of '64, Voting Rights Act of '65. He signed the Immigration and Nationality Act of '65, which prior to that act, it was if you weren't a white Northern or Western European, you had no access to immigrate to the United States. It wasn't until that act was passed in '65 that it opened up immigration to Latin Americans, to Asians, to Africans, Middle Easterns. So he really opened up and brought more of the melting pot into the United States.
So it's his fault we need a wall.
His war on poverty which a lot of people joked about. But
I not to joke about it because I think it's a good thing to fight poverty, but declaring war on inanimate things.
But it worked. It worked.
Well, did it?
It did, because prior to the acts that they put in place, there was 23% of the United States was living below the poverty line. That number dropped to 12%.
What is it now?
I think it's at 16%. So it's gone slightly back up.
Right. That's what I meant. It's like,
but
you might have those bursts.
You could argue, but look, he helped push through Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah.
The access to federal housing funding for low and impoverished people in the United States
as a result of the riots.
It doesn't matter. I don't care what caused it to happen. He was the one that helped push all this legislation through. So you can knock on him for Vietnam or whatever.
Well, there's not.
I would say
not damning evidence, but there's a considerable amount of circumstantial evidence that could basically mean he was a traitor.
No, I highly doubt that. Only on the strength that he was. Okay, so he
hated Kennedy.
I know that.
His guts.
I know that. But so in the 68 election, was it 68? Yeah,
that was the one that Robert was running.
Yeah, so it was the Johnson found out that Nixon went behind his back and made a deal with South Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Johnson had a deal in place to end the Vietnam War in 69.
Okay.
The war was going to be over. They would have all their troops out by 69 or 70. He had a deal in place with Vietnam to end it. Mm-hmm. Nixon's people went behind his back and made a deal with the South, and this is not a fucking conspiracy theory. The audio recordings.
I know.
But I know people out there listening probably think it's crazy though. The audio recordings were released by the White House not too long after Barack Obama took office of a conversation with Lyndon Johnson where the head of the RNC admitted that Nixon had committed treason. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, you can say, yeah, a lot of people think he might have had a hand to play in JFK's death for more of a build-up in Vietnam, but I have a hard time believing that when he was so dead set against the war by the end of the 70s.
Yes.
Just a couple of years later.
By the end of the 70s, you have to take into account that when he became president, there wasn't the upheaval of protesting and by 68 he had realized that the momentum of the country was going very far away from the war. So he did, theoretically, if he did have knowledge or a hand in Kennedy's assassination, and like I said, there is a considerable amount of circumstantial evidence that says that he did. Circumstantial, though. He would have, a good politician would know that the winds of popularity were shifting.
Yeah, but he if he's not,
excuse me,
he wasn't running for re-election.
Doesn't matter.
So he didn't.
Doesn't matter because he's looking at his legacy and he was looking at, again, this is a time where politicians did give a shit about whether they were good or bad.
I don't think he did. I really don't think he did.
I know. I think he gave a shit about public opinion to a degree because he still was that old time type of politician. Okay. For better or worse, I believe he truly, whether he did what he did or didn't do, I still think that at the end of the day, you have a group of men that had some level of principle as far as their jobs went. Mm-hmm. You had presidents who didn't become president in order to inflate their bank accounts or to push their own personal agendas, at least as far as they do today. I could see him changing his views. There's a lot of people who, and actually this is documented. He started suffering from depression, which is probably one of the reasons why he wasn't running in 68.
Possibly. And
it could be he was starting to feel guilty, theoretically, about what he did.
Yeah, I don't know.
All that aside, he did do some good things.
He did a lot of good things.
He will not be on my top 10 list.
And I would say that he is number 10 on New York Times list. But
if I have to compromise, you can have him at 10 or 12 or 11 or 12, but he's not on my top. I won't have my top 10.
They just to kind of run through some other ones. Teddy Roosevelt, I mean,
which I think he did a lot more out of office, kind of like Carter.
Well, I mean, he broke up the beef monopoly in the early 1900s. I think it was 6. There was like 6 beef companies that basically had a deal with each other that for price fixing, and he kind of broke all them up in the early 1900s.
I didn't know this. He was chief of police in New York.
Really?
Or commissioner? Chief commissioner, yeah. The head up of the police. I didn't know that. It's started watching that show, The Alienist. And he's a character in it.
Oh, okay.
That's his role. So I looked it up, and sure enough, he was.
But he's probably most known for his conservation efforts.
Yeah, which a lot of them are still in place today.
Yeah, he greatly expanded the national forest system.
He was also a game hunter, a big game hunter.
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, it was
it's kind of looked down upon now, and rightly so.
Well, it was 130 years ago. So
no, it was 120 years ago. Yeah, he wasn't very popular.
No, he wasn't.
Especially amongst the rich.
No, he wasn't.
For a Republican.
No. I don't know. Who else do you want?
Well, Eisenhower is someone I'm not maybe necessarily very high, but
I would put him.
I'd definitely put him maybe at like 5.
I'd put him top 5.
Yeah. And mainly just because of his the interstate. The reason we have highways is because
he also founded NASA.
And I didn't know that. I knew that he had helped push for NASA, but I didn't know he founded it.
He was also the president that sent troops into Arkansas to forcibly integrate public schools 3 years after Brown versus Board of Education.
Right. So I definitely have him high on the list. And again, another Republican. It's amazing how far the Republican Party has fallen from its original roots.
Well, speaking of current presidents,
I wouldn't have any of our current presidents on the list.
I would entertain. I had Barack Obama listed as a fringe, just because he did so much in office. Now, behold,
he did some good things.
Well,
but I do
the Affordable Care Act.
Yes.
The killing of Osama bin Laden.
Arguably.
Arguably.
It would have been much better if they could have taken him into custody.
Well,
he should have been tried, not executed.
So easing of restrictions and restoring relations with Cuba. He signed the stimulus that stopped the recession from getting even worse. He helped create the Paris Global Climate Change Agreement.
He did a lot of good things.
Yeah,
he did a lot of good things.
Passed Dodd-Frank.
I have a hard time, though, with...
Repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell with the U.S. Armed Forces.
I have a hard time, all that aside. All that's very good. It's all very positive, and I hope history remembers what his contributions to our country were. However, he endorsed and pushed forward a drone policy that killed a lot of civilian people.
Yeah.
More civilians than it killed enemies.
Yeah.
By like 10 to 1.
Well, there's not a single president we're going to say that we could list on here that's perfect.
I'm not saying perfect, but that's a pretty big thing.
Well,
I know someone personally who thinks Barack Obama should be brought up on war crime charges.
Really?
Yes.
I wouldn't go that far.
I said the same thing, but, you can't argue with the facts, and the facts are a lot of innocent people died because he endorsed a technically illegal war policy.
I wouldn't say it's illegal.
It was technically illegal.
How?
I don't remember exactly how it... Something to the effect that it went above and beyond his authority to engage in, because it was technically a war, a drone war. I'd have to look it up, but
no, it's not. First off, because it's not a war.
Yes, it's not a war in the traditional sense, but
we're
talking over 100,000 innocent people.
We haven't had a war in
100,000 innocent people.
Yeah,
there are people who have been executed and hung for less. That's my point. Again, I don't know the inner workings of it.
And those numbers, it's really hard to tell if those numbers are even accurate.
Those are the numbers we have. Those are the numbers we have.
I'd have to see the source of the numbers.
Well, those are the numbers we have. So, again, I voted for him twice. I'm not. This is not partisanship. I'm pointing out that, yes, and I did say that I wouldn't have any of the modern presidents on our list, past Kennedy.
Yeah.
I would have made an exception for Carter if he had been president longer. But other than that, no, I wouldn't. Because you pointed it out. Presidents aren't perfect, and I would be hard-pressed to find a single president since Kennedy who hasn't committed something that could be equated to war crimes.
I think that has more to do with the fact that you lived in the time.
Oh, possibly. Like I said, I want history to remember Barack Obama's accomplishments and his contributions.
Yes, and I had the same issues with their drone policy, but that aside.
He can't be on a top 10 list for
I think he did a tremendous job and passed a tremendous amount of positive things for this country.
True.
The 8 years that he was in office.
True. I'm not disagreeing with that. But if you look at the negatives.
But like I said, you can say that for any president.
Perhaps. I have a hard time with it. Because if you start to excuse. And now I'm taking the side of this person I was talking about who thinks he should be brought up on war crimes. I disagreed, but I'm going to take his side as far as looking at the historical significance of it. If you start to excuse the crimes because the person involved did a lot of good things, you basically devalue the rule of law.
Okay, but you can say the same thing about Harry Truman. The exact same fucking thing.
Oh,
you can say the exact same thing.
You're absolutely right. I wouldn't have Harry Truman on my list either.
But that's what I'm saying, though. I would.
I wouldn't.
I would.
Not me. No. When you murder 50,000 people, and I say murder because it is murder, whether it was for the right reason or not, 50,000 people in the matter of 24 hours, you don't get to be on a best of list.
But it
doesn't matter what it accomplished. It does not matter.
It does to the millions of Americans that would have died had we not done that.
Yeah, Americans.
Okay.
50,000 innocent Japanese people died in the blink of an eye.
And we would have lost more than that had the war kept going.
They say that. We don't know that any more than we know the exact number of innocent people that have died in the drone wars or the exact number of people who died in there.
But you can look at the way the war was going in the Pacific and see that maybe
we would have won either way.
Eventually. You're right. We would have won eventually, but we would have lost a whole lot more than 50,000 people.
And my grandfather could have been one of them because he was fighting in the Pacific. My point is, though,
so was mine.
You don't get to take a moral stance on anything if you allow immorality. Even if it's for the right reason.
Every single one of these presidents you can have issues with.
Not to that extent, though. We're talking to that extent.
To that extent of their time, yes, you could.
Perhaps. I'm just saying I disagree wholeheartedly with having Obama.
I mean, there's people out there that have issues with the way that Lincoln approached the Civil War.
I honestly don't think it could have gone any other way.
Sure it could have.
Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah, absolutely it could have.
So. The South was going to secede over that issue. The only way it could have gone differently is if Lincoln had just dropped it.
That was a possibility.
Yeah, but he didn't, and he was right not to. People didn't die because
they did.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Talking over me. Let me finish. People didn't die in the Civil War because Lincoln was self-serving an agenda. He was doing the right thing.
I wouldn't say Barack Obama was self-serving either.
No, there's a huge difference between having automated machines killing innocent people and fighting a war of principle. The drone war, there was no principle involved because it did not accomplish anything. The Civil War accomplished something.
Okay.
And it was a war on the moral side.
But that's what I'm saying though. There's a
moral benefit to it.
You can pick any president and find something wrong with them. And that's what I'm saying is you have to look at the only reason I could entertain not putting more current presidents on there is because you can't really see what the long-lasting effects of the presidency is. I can see the long-lasting effects of Truman. I can see the long-lasting effects of Johnson, even though you don't like him. I can see the long-lasting effects of Teddy Roosevelt, of FDR, of Lincoln.
I have no problem with Roosevelt. I just, there are limits to what I will excuse for the benefits.
Just, if Barack Obama did nothing but pass the Affordable Care Act, I would put him in the top 10.
But see, I have issue with the Affordable Care Act. I see its potential, but it didn't do anything. It literally literally boosted the income of the insurance companies.
But
it helped a lot of people.
It helped a shitload of people.
It helped a lot of people and the insurance companies, and it wasn't built properly.
It was.
No, and he could have gone farther with it.
And that's it. And that's what I'm trying to get to. Is yes, it was a good framework, but they took important pieces out of it. And one of the bigger pieces that they put into it, which was the ability to opt out of the Affordable Care Act in 2016 as a state, if you could provide similar coverage for your state, which was a provision that was put in to eventually lead to single-payer health care in the United States. But the problem has been, since 2016, no one has been able to put a plan together and pass it in their state.
Right. Well, it's because ever since 2017, the beginning of 2017, everyone's been trying to just get rid of it altogether.
I know. Well,
but the plan itself was not good. It was a good starting point.
It is a good starting point. No one has ever said there's a perfect plan. Nobody.
But he got that passed in his first term. By his second term, he should have been pushing to improve it. And he wasn't.
How? He had a majority in Congress for 56 days.
Yes, and he should have gotten a much better plan passed.
And in that time, they passed They passed the Lilly Ledbetter Act. They passed the Affordable Care Act. They passed the stimulus. They passed Dodd-Frank. All in 56 days.
You pointed out he had a majority. That Affordable Care Act should not have been gutted the way it was. It should have been a better plan because he had the majority to do it.
Because part of the supermajority that they had was Lieberman. That's why.
Perhaps I'm not saying he was the only one making mistakes.
Well, that was the deal that they made with Lieberman to pass the Affordable Care Act.
The Affordable Care Act
was taking the public option out,
dipping your toe into the ocean, and he had the ability. He could have put his whole foot in. It would have still been a step. It would have still been a small step.
But they would have never passed it. That's what I'm saying. Without Lieberman's vote, they would not have passed the Affordable Care Act.
I'm just saying. I don't want to take away from his contributions to history, but I can't overlook the things that went wrong. You're right. No president is perfect, but there are some presidents who's done some things or allowed things to happen that I can't see past.
A lot of people would say the same thing about JFK, having Marilyn Monroe sneak through the back door into the White House.
That's stupid.
But still,
I'm looking at more of the
but what I'm saying though is
moral implications.
It's issues. People are going to find issues more. That's a big fucking moral issue that people have with them.
But it has no bearing on any. It doesn't hurt anybody.
I know that. I understand.
These other things that we're talking about are moral things that hurt people.
But what I'm saying is, you can find something with any president.
Well, by that standard, then doing a top 10 list is tough. My point is that I'm choosing my battles. I'm choosing based on how I see those moral failings of mortal men, human men, and I guess I'm applying some judgment to it. But there are things I will not overlook. I'm sorry. Yes, dropping the bombs in Japan ended the war. But my moral code says that was wrong, regardless of what could have happened if he hadn't done it. Because you do not make that choice.
So what you're saying is one issue...
Yes, one issue can sway my view.
Can get rid of all the good that someone does.
No, it doesn't get rid of the good.
That's what you're saying.
It doesn't get rid of the good.
What I'm saying,
it does color my view of that.
Because
person.
what I'm saying is the opposite. I'm saying, look, yes, I understand that one thing that they did was terrible, but look at all the other good that they've done for the country.
I don't. It's not that I'm arguing with the good. I'm just.
What you're saying is.
What I'm saying is my personal opinion of them is colored by those bad things. I'm still capable of appreciating the good that they did.
Okay.
But my own personal opinion is colored by those actions. For sure. Because my moral code says that those actions were wrong. And I
don't think most people would argue with you.
Yeah. Well,
but what I'm saying though is most people I don't think would say because of that it would discredit all the good that someone did.
I'm not saying, but it's my point. I'm not discrediting
but you
what
are.
they do.
You are.
No, I'm just discrediting their position on a list. That's all.
What you're saying is because of one thing that happened, they're not one of the top quarter.
Well, I mean, we've got a very small pool to choose from.
That's what I'm saying.
So I guess by that argument, sure, fine, but
Ian, that's the point I'm trying to get to is if you're picking 10 people, you're going to have issues with most of them, but you only have 10 of 45 to pick from.
All right, fair enough. I'm not. It does not change my mind about how I view these people.
But what I'm what I'm saying though is you don't have if you're taking now if we had 145 presidents to pick from,
it'd be a different story.
It'd be a different story because you could probably be a little more choosy with them. But,
all right, I'll compromise with you. I'll let you put Truman on the list, but I have to fight against Obama. I'm sorry.
Okay. I mean,
and that's again coming from someone who voted for him twice.
But like I said, I had him like fringe anyway, as it was. It's not like I had him.
Number 6.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was one of the fringe. I had Bill Clinton as a fringe person also.
See, and he's one that again I was only old enough to vote for him once, but and I did, and I don't regret that decision. But I would say that Clinton is another one where some of the bad outweighs the good.
Well, yeah, I mean you could trace a good chunk of the Great Recession back to his presidency.
As far as his NAFTA policy goes,
and I know
NAFTA was
and deregulating banks that was under Clinton.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But you got to look at Clinton also ushered in the longest economic expansion in U.S. history.
I think which was helped and fueled by the tech boom.
It was because during his 8 years they created over 22 million jobs. Mm-hmm. Unemployment rates for African Americans and Hispanics were the lowest in recorded history. Mm-hmm. He signed the Family Medical Leave Act, paid off over $360 billion of the national debt. Right. I mean, the guy did good things. He did good things. I wouldn't put him in a top 10 list.
No. And my biggest issue with him is NAFTA. I know why he signed it, at least as far as the surface story goes, but.
Well, he signed it because it was negotiated under George Bush.
That and he still didn't have to sign it.
He didn't,
but he also did it as a compromise for some of those other policies that you pointed out. Doesn't matter. It was a bad deal, and it still hurts.
Yeah,
it's still hurting us today.
One thing that I think Bill Clinton doesn't get a lot of credit for is the creation of GPS. Because he signed the executive order shortly before he left office to de-scramble the satellite signals, which gave the country GPS signal.
I didn't even know that.
Because the government the military had been using GPS for years.
Right.
So yeah, he opened up GPS for everyone. Well, I mean, which it's not that big of a thing, but it's
it's a big enough thing for me who is greatly directionally challenged. I mean, like. Severely, like blind man directionally challenged. So GPS has been a very beneficial thing to me. But you're right. Yeah, that's very small potatoes on the international and world scale.
Speaking of Harry Truman earlier, I didn't know that Harry Truman established the NSA and the CIA.
See, that's another thing that I would almost say was a bad thing.
Really?
Yeah.
He also created the National Security Council.
Mm-hmm. See, those were baby steps, to which we still haven't totally hit, but those were baby steps to the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about.
Yeah.
That is obvious, still in effect, and stronger than ever.
Stronger than ever. He also did allow, which wouldn't fly today, but he allowed over 200,000 World War II refugees in the U.S.
From where?
From World War II countries.
Just across the board.
From Europe.
Well,
war-torn Europe.
Yeah, it wouldn't fly today, but see, that's something I see as that's a moral imperative. That's something that is the right thing to do, even if it's not necessarily.
But it wouldn't happen today, though.
Well, no, because we live in a morally bankrupt country right now. So,
I think we have for a while, really.
Possibly.
Well, since we're like way over an hour, let's try to put some kind of list together.
let's do it.
I don't know. What
if Truman has to be on the list? He's got to be 10.
I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm not saying Truman does.
Okay, good. If he is, he's on 10.
I mean, I would say I would think James Madison would have to be on there.
So I'll go ahead and 10.
Huh?
Go ahead and put him at 10 then. How about Polk?
Shut the fuck up.
How about Buchanan? Wasn't Buchanan the only alcoholic president we've ever had?
No, wasn't Buchanan the only gay president we've had?
I don't think. Well, if he was, I didn't know.
Which one?
I didn't know we've ever had a gay president.
Well, he wasn't openly gay.
Well, no one was openly gay back then.
Yeah, James Buchanan, because he was the only. Okay, so I'm just off the top of my head. I'm not actually looking this up. He was the only lifelong bachelor president we've had.
Okay, that does not necessarily make him gay, but okay.
But he had his friend, and I'm using air quotes right now.
Same kind of friend that J. Edgar Hoover had?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he had a friend that lived in the White House with him the whole time of his presidency.
Well, that actually improves my opinion of him, actually. A little bit.
Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover was blackmailed by the mafia because of his homosexuality. So yeah. It's something that no one really knows for sure if Buchanan was gay or not, but it sure.
How about Taft?
There were a lot of jokes about it at the time.
Oh, okay. How about Taft?
What did Taft do?
Isn't Taft the one who slept with Mr. Burns' mom?
God.
Just out of curiosity, I think that's who it was.
We got like 3 minutes to wrap this up.
Oh wow.
Well, I'm not really. We're at an hour and 16 minutes though. So
okay. Well, let's
put something together.
Okay. Let's put Washington 4 or 5.
I had Washington at 4.
Okay, that's fair. I want Jefferson at 3.
That's why I put him at.
Okay, cool. Because then number 1.
It's glad to know you want things, but
yeah.
Okay.
Well, usually I'm just easy going.
Typical fucking left, far left liberal. You can't compromise on anything. It's just got to be your way.
Really,
but go ahead.
Whenever we've
keep going.
Whenever we've done lists, I've always been very easygoing and compromise a lot.
I'm just busting.
There's certain things I will not compromise.
I'm just busting your balls.
It's called principle, Nick.
Whatever.
Teddy.
Yeah, I would
6
have
or 7.
Yeah.
How about Eisenhower? Let's put Eisenhower. Would you do 5 or 7?
Eisenhower?
Yeah.
No, I put him at 5.
Oh, okay, that's why I said 5 or 7. Because I think you put Teddy Roosevelt at 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you got 3 spots left.
Do we put Kennedy on there?
I wouldn't put him on there. Because it was. If he was able to not get shot to death and actually complete a lot of
that
stuff.
was totally his fault.
I know that.
Damn him for letting those bullets.
I'm not saying it was
his body.
Damn you, Lee Harvey Oswald, and your magic bullets.
I told them to slice my sandwich.
Oh, that's terrible.
A little bit of levity for a show that's pretty argumentative.
Yeah. I don't know. Since you shot down like every fucking person I said, why don't you throw something else out there, Chachi?
I didn't shoot down everyone.
Fuck yeah, you did. Everyone I've got on here, you said no to.
I want Reagan on there. I'm just kidding. Let's see.
I would say that on this February list, they had Reagan at number 9.
Huh.
Lower than I thought they would. And they had Barack Obama at number 8.
Yeah. Well.
So go ahead and
I'm looking. I'm looking.
Keep on looking.
I don't know.
Would you like me to go over some of the ones you said no to?
No, I remember the ones I said no to.
Okay.
Why don't you go over some of the ones I said no to that you are certain should be on the list, other than Obama? Because
I would put Harry Truman on the list. I would definitely put him on there.
Well, I told you if you want to put Truman on there, I'll go with that. But you got to put him at 10.
Well, I would put Johnson at 10, but okay.
See, I wouldn't. He was one that I'm sorry. If
I mean, mainly off the strength of his poverty platform and his civil rights platform.
I can't overlook the possibility that there's some complaint.
Because you got your tinfoil hat on.
As I pointed out, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. I know Carter. I like Carter.
I wouldn't like I said. Most of the stuff he did was post presidency.
Post-presidency. Yeah, that's not untrue. I don't know. I guess if we have to turn a blind eye to war crimes and treason, I'm gonna put Johnson on there. But Truman's 10, and Johnson's 9.
Okay.
Because at the very least, at least Johnson didn't call for the death of 50,000 people in the blink of an eye.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can just say that there is a possibility that because of that action, I'm sitting here today.
Me too. Me too.
You also.
But if we weren't sitting here today, then we wouldn't know it. So, to me, I still see it as a morally dubious decision. And I'm being generous.
Yeah, one more spot. What do you got?
Trump. I'm just fucking kidding.
I'm gonna stab you in his face.
Is Trump on that board?
He is.
Is he number 45?
No.
He's higher than 45.
Why is he number 44?
Who's 45?
Oh, because Grover Cleveland was president twice. Grover Cleveland's number 22 and 24.
Right.
So there's only been 44 presidents.
Gotcha.
There's been 45 presidencies, but only 44 presidents. So yes.
So he's still at the bottom of the list.
Yes.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. I really wish I could put Benjamin Franklin on there, but he's not a president.
Nope. I should leave all these long pauses then. Just
well, only to that maybe the microphone's picking up the gears turning. You can't see the smoke, but it can pick up the gears turning maybe. Andrew Jackson. What did he do? Other than end up on the $20 bill. And didn't he get shot by that Burr guy?
Yeah.
Grant was pretty useless as a president.
Yeah, he was one of the worst ones we had. It's funny because according to this February poll, from like president number 9 through president 17, so that would have been William Henry Harrison through Andrew Johnson, with the exclusion of Abraham Lincoln, were all like
ineffectual.
They were all terrible presidents according to this list. They were all 42, 37, 35, 38, 41, 43, and 40.
Right.
So we had a bad stretch there.
Yeah. Can we put Roosevelt on there twice? Franklin or Lincoln on there twice?
Come on, Ian. We need one more.
One more. God damn. I don't like any of my choices.
I know you don't.
This is total democracy at work.
I know.
Don't like any of our choices, and you're going to end up choosing one that you don't like.
Now you see why I had Barack Obama as a fringe one.
Yeah. Well, hey, if I can excuse atomic whatever, I guess I can excuse drone strikes. But I don't want it. What is that, number 7?
We could put him at number 10 and move the other ones up.
No. I think Truman should stay at 10. So move up from 9. Put Obama at 9.
Okay.
Because drone strikes maybe are a little...
No, I don't have anyone. I mean, like I said, the ones I wouldn't put.
Did you have a top 10?
Yeah.
What was your top 10?
Well, I'll go over my top 10 after I read our top 10.
All right.
So yeah, I'll put him on there. We'll move these guys up.
All right.
Okay, so ready?
Yep.
Here's our. I didn't think it was going to be this difficult.
It is tough because, well, I mean, it's not like we're doing a top 10 movies where our opinions can be swayed based on, or it's not. There's just not any. Yeah. This is different. This was a pretty argumentative episode. I don't think we've argued this much since our religion episode.
Yeah. So here's our top 10 U.S. presidents. At number 10, Harry Truman. Number 9, Barack Obama. Number 8, Lyndon Johnson. So it's basically the 3 that Ian said no to. Mm-hmm. Number 7.
Still not happy with the choice.
Number 7, James Madison. I could put Trump on there for you. Number 7, you got James Madison. Number 6, you got Theodore Roosevelt. Number 5, Eisenhower. Mm-hmm. Number 4, George Washington. Number 3, Thomas Jefferson. Number 2, Franklin Roosevelt. And number 1, Donald Trump. Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Which, if you go down the list I put together, it's pretty similar. Okay. I had Lincoln, Washington, Roosevelt, Eisenhower, Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt, Truman, Madison, Johnson, and Obama.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Because
I'm happy with the list from 5 up.
I would say
6 up.
I would say at the 44 presidents that we've had, I would probably really only classify maybe 20 of them, 18 to 20 of them, like good presidents. So, even though there's 44 presidents that we've had, if you're going to do a top 10
list. As far
list,
as good presidents
that we have, that have, like I said before, that have had long-lasting positive impacts on our country.
Okay.
Policy-wise.
All right, fair enough. I still tend to judge people by...
I know you do, because you judge people.
If you don't want to be judged, don't be president.
I know.
I don't judge my peers.
Maybe I'll be president one day.
Yeah, I'll judge the shit out of you when you're president. Seriously.
All right, that's all I got, Ian.
That's all I got. That kind of wore me out, actually. I haven't had a good argument like that in a while.
With this, the longest episode I think we've ever done. As always, you can email us any questions or comments to lifeingeneralmi@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter. If you like the show, leave us a review. Share it with somebody that you might also think, but you also think might like
with ears. If you know someone who has ears,
share the show.
Share this show.
Yes, that's what I was getting to. God, I'm fucking tired too.
Yeah.
Just leave us a review and check out the show, and that's all I got.
I'm good.
All right. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Peace.
Play my role, let me tell you about it. This shit right here, man, I'm proud about it. Only real niggas reside around me. Yo, old lady, drop a guard around me. Dip like I know you can, bitch. Show me the ropes like we in the ring. Got you two cobras, you wanna hang. Shoulder to shoulder, them niggas basic. You know I won't lie. You know that I ain't for that fuck shit. You niggas alright, but I'm way better and she love it. Know that you're sick as fuck. Here go this tissue, bro. We taking the dub. Hoping you get you some. This hit like a pick me up. She taking my drugs. Know they see the sign. That's some dollar sign. Know they sick as fuck. Know they sick as fuck. Tell them get well soon. Tell them get well soon. Know you sick as fuck. Get well soon.
Oh shit. Watch out, you the car, Billy. Oh shit. Right now, and I'm smiling in your face, bitch. With a gold smile, you should probably make placement to your eye. Niggas sick as fuck. Standing with niggas who down for that party. Who down for some bitches who showing their bodies. Swear to God, nigga, this Molly got me up and rolling. These bodies of water. Bring that shit in bottles. We mosh at the party. They hate when we style it.